Wind is tough. These are the fundamental things you need to understand to make a good wind call. So 1 to 3 miles per hour, smoke will begin to drift. 3 to 5, we begin to feel it on our face. 5 to 8, leaves on the trees will begin to be in constant motion. And then 8 to 12, dust is going to be able to kick up and things are going to get a little bit more aggressive as far as the wind speed goes. So generally speaking, that's how we can naturally find our wind speed, just by visually looking downrange, taking a look at the effects of what's going on. Also, we want to be concerned with the wind direction, because we're going to discount the speed based on the direction that the wind is coming from, right? So we use the clock method where our direction of fire is 12 o'clock. So if the wind is coming directly in my face from the 12 o'clock or directly from my 6, from the 6 o'clock, I don't compensate for the wind at all as a rule. Right, so directly in my face or directly behind me, I'm not making any corrections at all. So as I start to click off, I go to the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I start to add value to my wind speed, right? For example, a 10 mile per hour wind coming from 12 o'clock has 0 value. A 10 mile per hour wind coming perpendicular from the 3 o'clock, I'm gonna assign the full value to it. That'll be 10 miles per hour, right? And I'll start to discount that as the angle shifts. Another thing that we can look for downrange when we make a determination of what the wind is doing is the mirage. And mirage is simply a disturbance that we see through the optic as we're looking downrange that will indicate direction and speed to a degree. So if the mirage is at a boil, meaning it's just coming straight up and down, it's not deviating on an angle in any direction, then we can assume that's a 0 mile per hour wind. If that starts to angle off at about 60 degrees, we're going to call that about a 1 to 3 mile per hour wind. When it reaches 45 degrees, that'll be 3 to 7 miles per hour. And then past that, 7 to 12 miles per hour is going to be when the mirage is perpendicular in our field of view. And it gets very difficult to use mirage at that point to gauge what the actual wind speed is at that point. So the usefulness of mirage really for me is when, on those lighter wind days, when it looks like nothing is going on downrange, but there's actually something going on. I hone in on a particular spot on the range where I can see mirage the best. I back that magnification off so that it becomes more apparent, and that gives me a good assessment of what to do from there. So with direction of the wind, that's important as well, because we're going to discount our wind speed. A couple of things that we have at our disposal here, obviously the natural indicators are going to help us out a little bit, but also having range flags such as this one really help to indicate which direction the wind is coming from. If we have a kestrel, these can also be useful, as I have this little propeller in here, and if I go ahead and I turn the kestrel and I get that propeller to stop, that will help to indicate where that wind speed is coming from. This may take a little while. You might have to be going back and forth a little bit, but generally speaking, that's going to tell you, okay, my propeller is beginning to come to a stop in this general direction over here. And then I can go ahead and point it directly in that direction and then get an assessment of what my speed is. So now I have my direction and my speed of wind right here. So in order to help us understand visually what's happening downrange, we're going to go ahead and pop smoke so that we can see for sure what the wind pattern down there is doing, and we can understand better what the wind is doing in this area. So I'll go ahead and take a look in this spotting scope down here. And as I do this, the smoke is really going to help us determine what the prevailing wind pattern is. So when I'm shooting in an area, I really try to heavily influence my wind call with what I think is the prevailing wind pattern, right? The wind does a lot of nuanced things downrange. Sometimes it's not accurately represented by wind flags, or something that I see, that I think I see is happening, might not represent what the wind is actually doing. So I try to really figure out what is the prevailing wind pattern in this area, and then heavily influence my wind call based off of that. So we'll go ahead and take a look downrange. So as we're looking downrange, we have a guy at the 700 yard distance and we have a guy at the 1,000 yard distance. And we can already see a little bit of a conflicting wind pattern. So 700 yards, the wind is kind of matching what I feel back here. So I can feel it on my face at times. The vegetation is moving constantly at moments. So it's fluctuating from about 5 miles per hour to 8 miles per hour, and then sometimes completely dying. So at 700, it's kind of matching what I feel back here, blowing directly in my face. And then at 1,000, I see a crosswind pattern which we know to be true at this range. There's a break in the trees off to the right that you can't see, but there's a wind pattern that shows up down there that moves, in this case, right to left. That break in the trees causes a slightly different pattern to present itself. And now we see that wind is starting to match at times the wind pattern that I feel back here. So mostly I would say the prevailing wind pattern on this range is what I feel back here. It's blowing mostly in my face, gusting from, it goes from 0 miles per hour all the way up to, I would say, about 7 miles per hour, 8 miles per hour at times. But the wind is pretty dead today, so it is a little bit tougher to get a handle on what's happening. But to demonstrate the conflicting wind patterns and the nuances that we deal with as long-range shooters, you know, having that smoke pop at 7 and then at 1,000 really represents like, okay, there's a lot of different things happening downrange, and I can't necessarily account for all of them. So for me, as a shooter, I really like to figure out that prevailing wind pattern, and that's what heavily influences what my wind call is going to be. So with calling wind, you need to be patient with yourself. This is an art form, it's not a perfect science. A lot of other things that we do in long-range shooting is based in science. This, however, really hinges on our ability to determine what's happening downrange and make an educated guess on what to do. So be patient with yourselves, realize this is an art, and the more we do it, the better we're gonna get. And experience is everything when it comes to calling wind.